feel like this sword really fills the void. It is lightweight, historically accurate, has good distal taper and a good edge, and I feel like you could probably buy with some hot cash. This thing should really come with some eyeliner. I feel like if I made wings as sharp as the tip of this pommel, it'd be unstoppable. Really excited for this one, guys. Today we're taking a look at the two-handed Gothic longsword by Darksword Armory. Hi, welcome back to the channel. This is Kai with Ludus Ferocia, and today we're going to check out this beautiful longsword by Darksword Armory. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the sword itself, we're going to go ahead and talk about Darksword Armory as a company. What is their relationship to Ludus Ferocia? Well, they did send me this sword free of charge to review for you guys, but like we do with all of our reviews, it doesn't matter if it's sent to me for free or if I have to pay for it. As many of the swords here have been paid for, I'm going to give a fair and honest review, and the review of their sword is no different. Darksword Armory is known for making fantasy blades that are built like real blades. They're one of the few companies that do that and do a really good job of it. They're most well known for their reproductions of the Lord of the Rings series of swords, but again, in battle-ready form, so they are durable enough for heavy-duty test cutting. Now, because this is what they're most well known for, a lot of people have misconceptions that this is how they build all of their swords, because if you pick up some of their fantasy blades, they're extremely heavy and they're very, very thick compared to a historical example of, say, a longsword. A lot of people believe that this is how they make all their blades, not realizing that they kind of have to make blades like that are based on fantasy swords, because those fantasy swords are not exact one-to-one replicas of these historical examples. They're bigger, thicker, more exaggerated in certain spots, and because of that, you're going to have more material in very strange places that are going to shift the balance. Many people don't even know that Darksword Armory makes accurate historical reproductions of real medieval weaponry, such as this two-handed Gothic longsword that they make. And if you take a quick look through their website at their entire collection, you'll see that they have many other examples of historically inspired reproductions that are going to have correct weight, distal taper, and handling. But if battle-ready fantasy replicas are your thing, good news. We are actually going to be reviewing the Darksword Armory Ranger Sword in Damascus very, very soon. It's a beautiful blade. One of our archery instructors actually purchased it, and I've handled it only once, but we're going to do a full review on it just to kind of show the difference between their historical examples and their more fantasy offerings. But we think you guys are going to like it, so subscribe to the channel if you're interested in that. Now, this longsword is inspired by the Type 18B longsword from the Oakshott typology. And it is based on a historical example from a museum. The Type 18 longsword was extremely successful in Europe and was used a lot in the 15th century. It is considered the pinnacle of 15th century longsword technology because it had to keep up with the advancements of armor. This blade is a lot stiffer than other longsword blades I've handled in the past, and that is probably due to the diamond cross section. If you can tell right there in the video, I don't know if it's blurry, but you can see how there is a hollow grind here and here to make that diamond, and it goes all the way to the edges. So that makes it, in my opinion, maybe not the most forgiving cutter in the world, but it makes it a lot stiffer. So if I'm trying to pierce through a padded jack, or if I'm trying to force some mail rings to pop, this would be more likely what I would get that job done with than maybe an older type longsword that had more flex in the blade. Now, back in the 15th century, not everybody was able to afford a Type 18 longsword. They were considered expensive and not accessible to everyone. So not every mercenary and fighter would have a sword like this. This would be probably members of a wealthy family or nobility. They would have a Type 18 longsword that was probably a little more ornately decorated than this one is. But I personally like the more simple aesthetics of this one. I'm not really one for a lot of flair on my weapons. Now, this has a beautiful fishtail pommel, very pointy right here on the edges. And I found that This helped with my edge alignment quite a bit because of the extended portion of the pommel itself. Now I come from the Lichtenauer manuals of training, and I know most of you guys who do traditional German sword fighting, we never put our hand on the bottom of the pommel. I found through test cutting that I did not like that. I actually do prefer to put my hand halfway on the pommel, halfway on the hilt itself, and that really helped with edge alignment. I could control this almost like a rudder, like a boat in water. I could control my edge alignment a little more finely. I know that that is more Italian sword fighting, some Fiori stuff, but I don't know, a longsword's a longsword, and if you fight better with one or the other, you should probably just go to that. I love the aesthetics of the sword. I really think that it combines a level of elegance and simplicity, but also it's ornate enough to not look super plain. I really like the grip. The grip has a coffin shape to it. It is leather wrapped. It does look like there is cord underneath. And I felt that that coffin shape really helps with edge alignment. I can tell exactly where the edge is indexing. And the cord ribbing also makes it so I never have my grip slip. It is just very comfortable, very grippy, and I haven't had any of the leather coming apart on me either. It's all still intact. Something else I noticed about the grip too is that the seam right here, it does pop out a little bit, but it's still very snug. I'm sure that's glued down, but it's well glued down. I don't have any parts coming off, especially right here at the edges. None of that has come off with the amount of times we've used it, and we've cut quite a bit with this sword. Water's gotten on it because of the water bottles we've been using, and I've never had any of these edges come loose. I don't even feel it when I'm cutting. Let's talk about the scabbard next. I'm actually so impressed this even came with a scabbard, because most blades you buy, especially European type blades, you're gonna have to buy the scabbard separately at an additional cost, and it's usually pretty expensive. So the scabbard that came with the Darksword Armory sword is actually really good quality. It's leather wrapped, and it is wooden core, so it's not floppy. It has a wooden core, and it has no lining that I can see, so it does look like it's just wood in there, but it has soft ears right here that protect the sides of the blade. So the sword fits into the scabbard very, very well. It does have a little bit of play, as you can hear, back and forth, but the blade doesn't move around when I'm moving around. And the way that this belt hangs once it's on actually hangs very naturally. It's actually a pretty natural feeling scabbard, which I'm very happy with. This belt is not a traditional or a historical example of a real system that I know of. So if you're really into that and you want a more historically accurate way of hanging this sword, I would just remove this. It's all removable and you can hang it. I might exchange it with a chain system later on. I've seen other people wearing their long swords like that, and that would give it a little more freedom of movement, because once this is on, it is locked on that angle. It is locked on that angle. You can't really move it anymore. So if you're someone who needs to move that around a little more, I would say you need something else. But I do find that the overall quality, I love the ribbing on that. The overall quality of this scabbard is superb. I really like the stitching. It's very high quality, and the chape is pretty thick actually. It's usually the chape is like an afterthought on most of these scabbards, but this is actually pretty good. I like the ears that protect the sides, and it is a wooden core scabbard, so it's rigid all the way down, not floppy. So you're not going to accidentally pierce through it when you're resheathing and it goes through the side, and you've ruined your $150 scabbard, which is what I typically see them for. Now, the reason why I asked for this sword specifically from Darksword Armory was a practical one. I wanted a sword that I could use for cutting competitions of tatami mats and recreational cutting with my students and myself, such as water bottles and things like pool noodles. I wanted to see this sword would fill the role for all three of those types of targets. So before we get into how this thing handles, let's talk about specs to give you a little idea of what the numbers look like. Upon weighing the longsword, we found that it weighs approximately 3 pounds 7 ounces, which is well within the historical examples of longswords. Let's compare that weight with my tourney fetter from Purple Heart Armory, which comes in at 3 pounds and 4 ounces. It has the same blade length, but it is much, much skinnier than the Darksword Armory sword. Additionally, let's weigh my Techniques fetter, also from Purple Heart Armory, at almost the same exact weight, 3 pounds and 3.8 ounces, but it has a blade shape that is much more similar to the Darksword Armory sword. It is just a few inches shorter. Distal taper also was pretty well done on this sword because it starts off at around 8 millimeters and it goes down to about 4.5 millimeters at the tip. Now what those numbers translate to me is that this sword specifically works well with the swords I already use the most for solo practice and sparring. So I'm very, very happy about that. And I think I chose well in regards to what feels like what I already use. So those specifications make for a relatively lively blade. This isn't a particularly heavy longsword, but it isn't a particularly light one either. It's rather average, with a point of balance right almost exactly at 5 inches. I would say that this is like a medium feeling sword. It's not super lively, it's not the quickest, nimblest longsword in the world, but it's also not sluggish, and it cuts with a lot of authority when you actually cut. But as you can tell, I can stop the sword whenever I want, and that is really what matters to me, is I can move the tip of the blade, and I can chop with it when I need to and stop the blade where I need it to. The videos I'm showing now are shots of me using the two-handed longsword outside to show what it looks like when in use and in full motion. Now I normally can do this exercise with any of my fetters for a prolonged period of time, but due to the extreme heat of 103 degrees and the fact that this sword does weigh 2 ounces heavier, after about an hour of solo practice, I was drenched in sweat and my shoulders were aching. Now just because I felt fatigued from using this for an hour does not mean that you are going to feel those 2 ounces in single cuts. Let's talk edge geometry and sharpness. When I spoke with a representative at DSA, they told me that they don't really focus on making their swords razor sharp, and I was afraid that it would be a very similar experience that I've had with other European blades, such as my Kriegsmesser by Pavel Mach. Now, it has a very serviceable edge on it. I'm able to cut through targets extremely easily with this because of the way the blade is shaped, but it did not come all that sharp at all. It's sharp enough to do the job, but not what I'm used to with like katanas and things like that. And I was told to expect something very similar by Darksword Armory. I was pleasantly surprised that when I got the sword, that the edge is actually well made. I don't see an ugly secondary bevel, at least not one that I was expecting. It's probably easy to see a secondary bevel if you get really close to the blade and you shine it in the light, but it looks almost like an apple-seeded hollow ground bevel, which I think is actually kind of hard to do. I was just very pleasantly surprised that the blade came relatively sharp, what I would call toothy sharp. It's not enough to shave hair or anything like that off your arm, but it does glide through targets once you have good edge alignment. So awesome job with that, Darksword Armory. I really like the factory edge you put on it. It isn't the sharpest blade I've ever held, but I was told it wouldn't be. It's just sharper than I thought it would come. So now to ask the big question, how does it perform? How does it cut? Well, I will say that it is not the most forgiving sword for beginners to learn how to cut with. Because a sword like this truly relies on edge alignment. It is not forgiving like a katana or any kind of thicker, stiffer blade. Cutting through bottles took some time to understand where the edge alignment really had its sweet spot, but once you figure it out, this sword glides through any bottle that you put in there. And we did everything from the lightest milk jugs to the heaviest green tea bottles that had the thick walls on them. And at the end of the day, even my newest students were able to cut with this sword, which is truly impressive. I was able to cut effortlessly through 1/2 inch green branches with one hand, With two-hand, I probably wouldn't have felt any resistance at all, but most of the cuts were very, very clean and took very, very little effort. I did want to see how well the edge held up to harder targets. So I chopped into some pine just to see if I could roll the edges. And to this day, out of everything we've cut, there are no burrs or rolls on the edge itself. It is still in great condition, and I can't feel any deviation of the edge itself. So it's a very, very durable sword. Now, if I want to push the limits of this sword and cut through something like yellow bamboo, I could do that. I don't have any accessible to me right now, but that might be a future video where we do a little bit more light torture testing on this sword. I'm not going to do a destruction test or anything like that. There are plenty of YouTube channels you can watch for a destruction test, but cutting through something like yellow bamboo or even green bamboo would be, I think, a great way to test the durability of the sword. Some of the things I did not like about this sword, the biggest complaint I have is about this little ledge right here, this little triangular ledge right there. And it's because when you are trying to throw techniques like a spheric, it's really hard. Now, I wouldn't say it's really hard, it's just more difficult to throw one when I can't flatten my entire hand on the blade right there. I want to be able to do this, and I can't. I have to kind of raise and go over right there to do that. Now, does that stop me from throwing that technique? No, I can throw that technique all day with this sword, and it's pretty fast. I just can't really do it indoors right now. But it's still fast, but you can feel this as a hot spot right here. If I had a choice, I know it's an aesthetic choice right now because it matches the hollow ground diamond shape of the blade right there, kind of follows the form factor. But for that specific technique, for your any technique that requires a thumbs up grip, so a krumm pile, anything like that, this is gonna be a hindrance after a while. And I could grind it down, but I really don't wanna mess up the look of the blade. I don't have all the tools to polish that out, so it's gonna look like an eyesore on the blade. I'm not gonna do that. But if I had a choice, that would be what I changed on the blade. I would like it to come a little sharper, but I already know that Darksword Armory has their way of sharpening, their methods of sharpening. And the only other complaint I have is an aesthetic one, and it is just the peen. So the peen doesn't look bad, right? It doesn't look terrible, but it is a little rough and you can see it. I think, you know, if this were a more expensive blade, something from Albion, it would probably be worth it to clean that up and make it look like there's no peen at all. But for this price point, honestly, it's okay. It's just one little nitpick I have that really doesn't matter compared to this one. So otherwise, I really like this blade. Do I think it's worth the money? So let's talk about cost. At the cheapest, this sword is around $620 US, and that comes with the scabbard. That's incredible because if you have any experience buying European style blades, long swords, Kriegsmessers, Messers, anything like that, you know that the scabbards are typically made separately and they cost a lot of money. So the fact that this sword comes with a quality scabbard for the cheapest price they offer it for $620 US, that's pretty awesome. Now, that is the blunted steel version with the cheapest belt on the scabbard. Now, its most expensive package is the sharpened model with a scabbard, of course, but with the best belt that they offer, and it is this belt. I think still at $780, not including shipping, of course, this is still a really good deal for what you are getting. You are getting a quality longsword with good distal taper, quality heat treat, and great dimensions, and also it's a looker. It is a really nice looking sword, and it is capable of cutting in both competition and recreation. $780, I think that's well spent on a sword like this, because it feels like some of the more expensive 1,000+ swords that I've handled in the past. In fact, it feels on par with my Pommel Kriegsmesser in terms of quality. Now, the handling on my Kriegsmesser I think is superior to this sword, but these are two different swords. This is meant to be used one-handed and two-handed, but in terms of fit finish, steel choice, heat treat, and everything it comes with, my Pommel Kriegsmesser with shipping costs way more than what would have been paid for the Gothic two-handed longsword. So I think it's a really good deal, and you won't regret the purchase. Thanks for tuning in on our review of the Darksword Armory two-handed Gothic longsword. If you enjoyed videos like this, consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us out, and we can get more swords like this in for us to test and show you if it's worth buying. So until then, go ahead and pick up one of these with your favorite set of eyeliner, your darkest feelings, and the tallest set of Doc Marten boots you can find. That's all I got for you. Enjoy some slow motion cutting footage on me. Right through.